2 hours. And I know some of you are wondering about the protest today. Some of you wearing orange may have been at the protest. Some of you wearing orange bandanas maybe were at the protest. We had 700 people on Dag Hammarskjöld Plaza, and that was good. We were protesting George Bush speaking this morning at the United Nations. And I think it was a good protest, but it was nowhere near as good as the march afterwards. We had an unplanned, unpermitted, very organized, very disciplined, very gorgeous and beautiful march all the way from the United Nations down here to Washington Square. And it was absolutely the kind of thing and the kind of spirit and defiance we need if we're going to end this war and drive out this illegitimate regime. That's what I have to say about it. There were 17 or 18 people arrested today. You might have heard about it on the news. Some people were arrested at Dag Hammarskjöld Plaza. I understand most of those people have been released on a desk appearance ticket. There are still 3 people who are being held, and the charges have not been filed yet, but they may be obstructing official business and obstructing governmental business, whatever that was. We are hoping that they get let out tonight. And as usual, in the wake of this, it may take months of legal appearances and going to court to support these people, but it was a situation of a beautiful, spirited, principled protest, and we will be filling everyone in as we go in terms of what happens with these really illegitimate arrests. We have a lot to bring you tonight, and I want to introduce very briefly, first of all, Sabina, who's an organizer with the New York City chapter of World Can't Wait, and someone who led the youth protest today, who's going to talk just briefly about some things to keep in mind organizationally while, excuse me, and then we will get into the meat of tonight's presentation. Thanks. Sabina?
Welcome everybody and good evening. It's fantastic to see that most of us stuck out the whole day and we're here tonight. So great to see all of you. I want to play a little bit of a game, and I hope that's okay. We're going to play a little bit of an envisionment game. So if you can, just go with me for a minute, close your eyes. Close them. Imagine the world that you want to live in. Just imagine that world. Get a picture in your head. Think of how great it would be, that world that you want to live in. Now imagine what obstacle stands in the way right now of that world that you want to live in. It's the Bush regime. They're that obstacle that's standing in the way right now from that world that we want to live in. Now imagine how much closer we would be to that amazing world if the Bush regime was actually driven from power. And now I'm not talking about driven from power because it's 2008 and the Democrats have won the elections and Bush is over. I'm talking about driven from power by the people. By the people getting out in the streets and showing their resistance to the Bush program and not stopping until he is actually driven from office. That's the kind of thing I'm talking about here. Imagine just what our city, imagine what this city could look like. I mean, you guys were out there today. Show of hands, how many of us were out there rocking it today, hollering our hearts out in the streets? Clap it up, guys, it was great today. It's an amazing feeling being out there. Man, this is the exact kind of thing that we are talking about. What happened today is the perfect example of the kind of thing that needs to be going on in this city every single week. And I'm talking like taking all of your friends with you and growing and getting larger, and this resistant movement building, so that Bush is actually being put in a situation where he has to step down. Now, you might say, Sabina, that's great and all, but come on, is that really possible? How many of us are asking ourselves that question, whether or not this is really possible, driving out the Bush regime? Thank you for being brave. Yes, we've all, I'm sure, pondered it at one time or another. But you know what? I am so strongly convinced every single day that I wake up in the morning that it is possible. And I am convinced on that because I look at you and I see what happens on days like today, and I know that it depends on what we do in this city to actually make this possible. It depends on each and every one of us. So, don't you want that? It's not going to be easy. I know that for sure. It depends on what we do. And so, ladies and gentlemen, all you wonderful people out there, I pose this question to you. What do you want to do? How are we going to do this? How are we in this city actually going to keep this going? Let's keep it going every single week. Do you want to come to Washington Square on Friday and be part of getting orange everywhere? Do you want to be part of the group of people that paints orange all over the city, or, spreads bandanas everywhere so that the color of resistance, this orange color, gets everywhere? Do you want to be one of those people who calls people and lets them know about the world can't wait, drive out the Bush regime and what we're trying to accomplish, and get in touch with the thousands of people that have signed the call and want to be plugged in? Do you want to hold a house party and raise money for these ads that need to be in newspapers because the people want this? The people need to hear this message. What do you want to do? Let's talk. I'm here. I'll be around all night. The most important thing that you gather from what I'm saying up here right now is that we need each other. We, the 50 people in World Can't Wait, or the 100 people, can't do this. We need to spread this word and get everybody on board, because you know that they hate the crimes of the Bush regime and they want this war to end. We need to be the kind of people that get out there boldly and vibrantly and enthusiastically and just raise the call out there as loud as possible. The world can't wait. Drive out the Bush regime. Thank you.
Part of the expression of the obstacles of what we are up against is the creeping censorship, and some would say the fascist remaking of the society emanating from the Bush regime over the last 6 years. And World Can't Wait has had extraordinary experience publishing a lot of full-page ads in the New York Times and other publications over the last 2 years. But in the last week, we have been refused 3 days in a row by publications in New York City, the most liberal city in the country. First of all, Metro New York, the free subway paper. Second of all, yesterday, the Washington Square News, the newspaper of this university, New York University. And today, the Spectator at Columbia University refused to run this ad behind me because they said, that ad is too disrespectful. We might lose advertising revenue for our newspaper. And I said to them, you have a journalism school at Columbia. What are you trying to train journalists to do? Spew out pro-propaganda? Or are you trying to train journalists to look at the truth? And to at least, even if you can't write about it, allow us to buy some free speech in your publication. We were prepared to pay full price for these ads to reach students. So one of the things that we're going to talk about and call upon the students in the House to do, and the older people too, is to get out to Columbia campus tomorrow. We are going to go protest at the Spectator. They had thousands of people practicing free speech over the last 2 days on that campus when Ahmadinejad came. We'll talk about that later, what time. But the point is, we are going to have a deep discussion today about what we're up against in terms of the terms being set by the Bush regime right now, and we know this came from the top. It came from George Bush speaking last Thursday in a White House press conference condemning Move On, and immediately the U.S. Senate, 3/4 of the U.S. Senate passed a resolution condemning the ad and the New York Times for running it. And just like that, our access and our openings dried up. This is a situation we cannot tolerate. All of the crimes of the Bush regime, the ongoing war and occupation of Iraq, Afghanistan has gone to hell, and now he's threatening Iran, need to be put in front of questioning people in this city and all across the country. This is one of the things that, absolutely has to happen if we're going to change the situation of people living in this country actually taking responsibility for what happens to the people in the rest of the world as well as ourselves, and for turning around and stopping the crimes of the Bush regime. We're going to see a very beautiful and short video that condenses this a lot right now, that's currently just been debuted on the World Can't Wait website. Prachi? In her place, we have two other military mothers. Closest to me is Elaine Brower. From the World Can't Wait, Drive Out the Bush Regime, and sitting next to Elaine is Tina Richards from Grassroots America. She's given up her life and moved to Washington, D.C., and is waging an intense effort to end the Iraq War. Our third responder to the main presentation is Sunshara Taylor, who's also on the advisory board of the World Can't Wait and is a writer for Revolution newspaper. And now I would like to introduce our main presenter tonight. We are extremely fortunate to have Chris Hedges with us. Almost a year ago, on October 30th of last year, just after the Military Commissions Act had been passed, we convened a teach-in uptown at St. John the Divine. And Chris gave a presentation at that time that was actually drawn from his latest book, American Fascists, The Right-Wing War on America, that I know it stayed with me for the last 10 months, and I know many of you feel the same. Chris has just finished another book, and you know that he has several best-selling books already under his belt, as well as a long career in journalism. He was the Mideast bureau chief for the New York Times newspaper, and he left that position in order to write directly about his experiences and to convey to us in some very wonderful, challenging, and moving ways the kind of world that we're living in today. And not only that, but has taken a variety of principled stands in his lifetime and in his writing that are really very inspiring for people such as ourselves who are trying to find our way in this world and figure out what is it that we can do to really turn around this intolerable situation where monstrosities are being done in our name. So I would like you to give a big welcome and much appreciation to Chris Hedges. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you, Deborah. War with Iran, a war that would unleash an apocalyptic scenario in the Middle East, appears increasingly likely before the coming presidential elections. I do not know when, or finally if, an attack on Iran will take place. But I do know that all the pieces on the chessboard are in place, that the rhetoric and propaganda is now geared towards preparing the United States for a massive strike on Iran, that many intelligence and State Department officials privately believe such an attack will take place, and that our allies from the French to the Germans to the Israelis talk as if war is inevitable. Let us hope sanity prevails, but sanity is a rare commodity in a White House which has perverted Leon Trotsky's concept of permanent revolution into a concept of permanent war, with, of course, the same nefarious aims to intimidate and destroy all those classified as foreign opponents, to create permanent instability and fear, to silence domestic critics who challenge leaders in a time defined as a national crisis. It works. Most citizens of the United States, nakedly being stripped of their most basic civil liberties, are powerless, compliant, and afraid. And if you doubt me, take a look at the Democratic Party. The Democratic candidates, with the exception of Dennis Kucinich, have not called for the resumption of our system of checks and balances. They seek not to restore these balances, but to seize power, all the while solidifying in their name the iron grip of the corporate state. George Bush, claiming to be anointed by a Christian God to reshape the world, and especially the Middle East, defined 3 states at the start of his reign as this of evil. They were Iraq, now occupied, North Korea, which because it has nuclear weapons is untouchable, and Iran. He has turned his Middle East planning to neoconservative ideologues such as Elliott Abrams, a convicted felon who helped orchestrate the disastrous and illegal Contra war in Nicaragua, and who now handles the Middle East for the National Security Council. Abrams knew nothing about Central America. He knows nothing about the Middle East. He sees the world through the childish, binary lens, good and evil, us and them, the forces of darkness and the forces of light. And it is this strange twilight mentality that now grips most of the Bush administration's civilian planners who are barreling us towards a crisis of epic proportions. We already see the sadly familiar propaganda campaign for war. Army General David Petraeus told the National Press Club a few days ago that, quote, "You can't win in Iraq just in Iraq. A victory in Iraq necessitates greater involvement with respect to some of the neighboring countries, some of the source countries for foreign fighters, and it certainly involves Iran." Or take Senator Joe Lieberman's fatuous question to Petraeus during the general's Senate testimony. "Is it time to give you authority," Lieberman asked, "in pursuit of your mission in Iraq, to pursue the Iranian Quds Force operations in Iranian territory in order to protect American troops in Iraq?" Lieberman has declared that the Iranian government, by its action, has declared war on us. Bush has accused Iran of putting the Middle East, quote, "under the shadow of a nuclear holocaust," and added that the United States and his allies would face Iran before it is too late. I wake up and half expect to see Judy Miller again emblazoned on the front pages of the New York Times, although the advocates of war are spinning and manipulating the press astutely enough without her. Even the man who played Cassandra in the war with Iraq, who warned us of our folly and the delusion of those who advocated it, has reappeared, looking somewhat like the ghost in Hamlet on stage. Mohammed el-Baradei, the Nobel Prize-winning Egyptian head of the International Atomic Energy Agency, says that while there is evidence that Iran has hidden some of its nuclear activities from the agency, there is no firm evidence that it is in fact developing nuclear weapons or diverting materials from its civilian nuclear program. He calls for negotiations built around Iran's commitment to the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. He hopes to press for intrusive inspections and to reach a new deal with Tehran to answer a series of specific questions over the autumn. But we are ruled by a government that makes its own reality. Americans entranced by the info entertainment that passes for news on cable networks are unlikely to read the latest IAEA report, and the Bush administration has blithely tossed the report into the bonfire they are building for. The State Department, 7th briefing, cited the report as further evidence of Iranian non-compliance and announced that, quote, "If Iran wants to take steps backward to limit its cooperation with the IAEA or with other parts of the international community again, that is only taking them further away from a resolution on this issue, and I think will only lead to further negative consequences for the government and unfortunately for the Iranian people as well." And let's not romanticize the Iranian president, Mahmoud Ahmadinejad, or the repressive groups of clerics who rule Iran. I was arrested and tossed into a jail cell on 2 different occasions in Iran as a correspondent there for the New York Times. I was deported once in handcuffs. I was followed, my phone was tapped, and my Iranian translator harassed and bullied until she left the country. I got a small taste of the murderous and repressive apparatus that keeps figures like Ahmadinejad in power. And because I also spent considerable time in Saddam Hussein's Iraq, I came to know the self-defeating blustering these tyrants use to justify their own internal repression and assure their population that they are ready and eager for war. This is why Ahmadinejad earlier this month made the preposterous claim the nuclear program is now operating at 3,000 centrifuges, the necessary level to enrich uranium for nuclear fuel within a year. It is why Saddam Hussein, although he had no weapons of mass destruction, was unable to publicly concede his own nakedness and vulnerability. The hypocrisy of this new moral crusade is not lost on those in the Middle East. Iran signed the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. Iran has violated a codicil of that treaty written by European foreign ministers, but this codicil was never ratified by the Iranian parliament. I suspect Iran does, by the way, intend to acquire nuclear weapons. I do not want to minimize the danger should it acquire them in the estimated 5 to 10 years. But contrast Iran with Pakistan, India, and Israel. These three countries refused to sign the treaty. They developed nuclear weapons programs in secret. Israel now has an estimated 400 to 600 nuclear weapons. The word Dimona, the name of the location where the nuclear facilities are located in Israel, is shorthand in the Muslim world for the deadly Israeli threat to the Muslim world's existence. What lessons did the Iranians learn from our Israeli, Pakistani, and Indian allies? What lessons have been learned by other countries in the region? These nations saw that the United States did not concern itself with international law and treaties when its allies secretly built nuclear weapons. These treaties only count for Washington's enemies. The excuses make no sense to those versed in the reality of Iraq and the Middle East. The idea that Tehran is directing attacks on American troops in Iraq belies the fact that very few troops are killed by Shiites. The idea that Tehran is seeking to destabilize a Shiite-led government that has extremely close ties to Iran is absurd. The notion that Iran would commit suicide by actually using a nuclear weapon hands to the Iranian government an irrationality it does not possess. And the naked hypocrisy of the United States mocks all the indignant rhetoric of a Lieberman, a Bush, or a Petraeus. Is it any wonder that Egypt, Jordan, and Saudi Arabia have all expressed a desire for nuclear capacity? Can we not grasp that Iran, knowing that with a touch of a button, Israel could obliterate the country, would seek nuclear weapons, especially in an age when permanent war entails making preemptive and unprovoked strikes? And can we not see that the answer is not more nuclear bombs, but a nuclear-free Middle East, including a nuclear-free Israel? I do not delude myself that in the current political climate, this is possible. I raise it only because it is finally the only way to protect Israel and the region from catastrophic war. All efforts short of war must be made to stop Iran from obtaining nuclear weapons. But if we fail, we must be prepared to live with a nuclear Iran. It is only a matter of time before more states, including failed states, acquire these weapons. And attacking Iran, while it may retard the Iranian program, will spur dozens of other nations into the nuclear arms race. John Abizaid, the retired Army general who headed Central Command for nearly 4 years, said that if Iran gained nuclear weapons, the United States could deter it from using them. Quote, "Iran is not a suicide nation," he said recently. "I mean, they have some people in charge that don't appear to be rational, but I doubt that the Iranians intend to attack us with a nuclear weapon. The Iranians are aware," he said, "that the United States has a far superior military capacity. I believe that we have the power to deter Iran should it become nuclear," he said, referring to the theory that Iran would not risk a catastrophic retaliatory strike by using a nuclear weapon against the United States. A war with Iran would be different from the war in Iraq. It will usher in the apocalyptic nightmares spun out in the dark, fantastic visions of the Christian right. There are those around the president who see this vision as preordained by God. Indeed, the president himself may hold such a vision. The heavy military buildup in the region over the last few weeks is perhaps another show of force, or perhaps a preparation for an attack. The American Strike Force Carrier Group in the Persian Gulf, Arabian Sea, led by the USS Enterprise, has been joined by the USS Nimitz and the USS Truman strike groups. There are now 3 American naval, air, and marine forces within striking distance of Iran. We are actively engaged in an effort to destabilize the Iranian regime by recruiting tribal groups and ethnic minorities inside Iran to rebel. We have selected over 1,000 sites inside Iran to wipe out its nuclear production and cripple the 850,000-man Iranian army. The Bushehr nuclear power plant, along with targets in Saghand and Yazid, the Iranian enrichment facility in Natanz, a heavy water plant and radioisotope facility in Iraq, the Artikon nuclear fuel unit conversion facility and nuclear technology center in Isfahan will all probably be struck by the United States and perhaps even Israeli warplanes. The Tehran Nuclear Research Center, the Tehran molybdenum iodine and xenon radioscope production facility, the Tehran Jaber-in-Hayyan multi-purpose laboratories, and the Kali Electronic Company in the Tehran suburbs will also most likely come under attack. Most of these facilities are in heavily populated areas. The loss of civilian life will be astronomical, and the rage it will engender will lock us in a death embrace with Iran. The disaster last year in southern Lebanon, where the Israeli air campaign not only failed to break Hezbollah, but united most Lebanese behind the militant group, is a good example of what would happen if we carried out airstrikes on Iran. The massive Israeli bombing of Lebanon failed to pacify 4 million Lebanese. What will happen when we begin to pound a country of 70 million people whose land mass is 4 times the size of France? As retired General Wesley K. Clark and others have pointed out, once you begin an air campaign, it is only a matter of time before you have to put troops on the ground or accept defeat, as the Israelis had to do in Lebanon. And if we begin dropping bunker busters, cruise missiles, and iron fragmentation bombs on Iran, this is the choice that must be faced. Either sending American forces into Iran to fight a protracted and futile guerrilla war, or walking away in humiliation. But as ominously, an attack on Iran will ignite the Middle East. The loss of Iranian oil, coupled with silkworm missile attacks by Iran on oil tankers in the Persian Gulf, will send oil soaring to at least $200 a barrel. The price of oil would certainly double the moment war began. The effect on the domestic and world economy will be devastating, very possibly triggering a huge global depression. The Middle East has 2/3 of the world's proven petroleum reserves and nearly half its natural gas. A disruption in the supply will be felt immediately. The 2 million Shiites in Saudi Arabia, the Shiite majority in Iraq, and the Shiite communities in Bahrain, Pakistan, and Turkey will turn in rage on us and our dwindling allies. We will see a combination of increased terrorist attacks including on American soil, and the widespread sabotage of oil production in the Gulf. Iraq, as bad as it looks now, will become a death pit for American troops as Shiites and Sunnis for the first time unite against their foreign occupiers. Iran, in retaliation, will fire its missiles, including the new Qatar-1 with a range of 1,100 miles, on American installations in Iraq, including the Green Zone. Expect substantial casualties, especially with Iranian agents and their Iraqi allies calling in precise coordinates. Iranian Shabab-3 and Shabab-4 missiles, as well as the Qatar-1, will be launched at Israel. The Strait of Hormuz, which is the corridor to 20% of the world's oil supply, will often be closed down and always be treacherous. Chinese-supplied C-801 and C-802 anti-shipping missiles, mines, and coastal artillery, along with speedboats packed with explosives, will target shipping in the Strait, along with the Saudi oil production and oil export centers. Hezbollah forces in southern Lebanon, interpreting the war of Shiites, will fire rockets into northern Israel. Israel, already struck by missiles from Tehran, will begin retaliatory raids on Lebanon and Iran. Pakistan, with a huge Shiite minority, will reach greater levels of instability. The unrest could easily see the overthrow of the weakened American ally, President Musharraf, and usher into power Islamic radicals. Pakistan, rather than Iran, could become the first radical Islamic state to possess nuclear weapons. And the neat little war with Iran, which nearly all Democrats do not oppose, has the potential to ignite a regional conflagration. The country, however, that will pay the biggest price is Israel. And the sad irony is that those planning this war think of themselves as allies of the Jewish state. A war of this magnitude could see Israel drawn back into Lebanon and sucked into a regional war, one that would over time spell the final chapter in the Zionist experiment in the Middle East. The Israelis call their nuclear program the Samson option. The biblical Samson ripped down the pillars of the temple and killed everyone around him, along with himself. It may be a sad and apt metaphor. The most effective diplomats, like the most effective intelligence officers and foreign correspondents, possess empathy. They have the intellectual, cultural, and linguistic literacy to get inside the heads of those they must analyze or cover. They know the vast array of historical, religious, economic, and cultural antecedents that go into making up decisions and reactions. And because of this, endowed with the ability to communicate and more able to find ways of resolving conflicts through diplomacy, they are less prone to blunders. But we live in an age where dialogue is dismissed and empathy is suspect. We prefer the illusion that we can dictate events through force. It hasn't worked in Iraq, it hasn't worked in Afghanistan, and it won't work in Iran. But those who once tried to reach out and understand, who developed expertise to explain the world to us and ourselves to the world, no longer have a voice in the new imperial project. We are instead governed and informed by moral and intellectual trolls. To make rational decisions in international relations, we must perceive how others see us. We must grasp how they think about us and be sensitive to their fears and insecurities. But this is becoming hard to accomplish. Our embassies are packed with analysts whose main attribute is long service in the armed forces and who frequently report to intelligence agencies rather than the State Department. Our area specialists in the State Department are ignored by the ideologues driving foreign policy. Their complex view of the world is inconvenient, and foreign correspondents are an endangered species, along with foreign coverage. We speak to the rest of the globe in the language of violence. The proposed multi-billion-dollar arms package for the Persian Gulf countries is the newest forms of weapons systems as message. U.S. Undersecretary of State R. Nicholas Burns was rather blunt about the deal. He told the International Herald Tribune that the arms package, quote, says to the Iranians and Syrians that the United States is the major power in the Middle East and will continue to be and is not going away. The arrogant call for U.S. hegemony over the rest of the globe is making enemies of a lot of people who might be predisposed to support us even in the Middle East. And it is terrifying those, such as the Iraqis, Iranians, and Syrians, whom we have demonized. Empathy and these that make real communication possible have been discarded. We use tough talk and big weapons deals to communicate. We spread fear, distrust, and violence. And we expect missile systems to protect us. George Bush has shredded, violated, or absented America from its obligations under international law. He has refused to sign the Kyoto Protocol, backed out of the Anti-Ballistic Missile Treaty, tried to kill the International Criminal Court, walked out on negotiations on chemical and biological weapons, and defied the Geneva Convention and human rights law in the treatment of detainees. Most egregiously, he has launched an illegal war in Iraq on fabricated evidence we now know had been discredited even before it was made public. He seeks to do the same in Iran. The president is guilty in short of what in legal circles is known as the crime of aggression. And if we as citizens do not hold him accountable for these crimes, if we do not actively defy the government and support impeachment, we will be complicit in the codification of a new world order, one that will have terrifying consequences. For a world without treaties, statutes, and laws is a world where any nation, from a rogue nuclear state to a great imperial power, will be able to invoke its domestic laws to annul its obligations to others. This new order will undo 5 decades of international cooperation, largely put in place by the United States, and thrust us into a Hobbesian nightmare. A rule-based world matters. The creation of these international bodies and rules, as well as the use of our influence over the last half-century to see they were followed, has allowed us to stand as a nation that not always, but often respects and defends the rule of law. If we demolish the fragile and delicate international order, if we permit Bush to create a world where diplomacy, broad cooperation, and law are worthless, if we allow these international legal systems to unravel, we will see our moral and political authority plummet. We will erode the possibility of cooperation between nation states, including our closest allies, and see visited upon us the evils we visit on others. This administration has rendered our nation deaf and dumb. We no longer have the capacity for empathy. We prefer to amuse ourselves with trivia and gossip that pass for news rather than understand. We are blinded and intoxicated by our military prowess. We believe that huge explosions and death are an effective form of communication, and the rest of the world is learning to speak our language. You will be raptured into heaven, your clothes left behind with the non-believers, then this news should cheer you up. If you are rational, however, these may be some of the last few weeks or months in which to enjoy what is left of our beleaguered, dying republic. The scenario that faces us requires those of us as citizens to act. The Democratic Party, which does not have the stomach to halt the war in Iraq, has made it clear it will cheer on our self-immolation in Iran. A country that exists in a state of permanent war cannot exist as a democracy. Our long row of candles is being snuffed out. We will soon be in darkness. I ask you to join me, if we should go to war with Iran, in refusing to pay your income tax. Put the money in an escrow account, dispute this, go to court. Maybe a few courageous judges will rule that the Constitution has been usurped and the government is guilty of what the post-war Nuremberg laws defined as a war of aggression. Maybe, maybe not. I no longer know. But I know this. I have friends in Tehran, in Gaza, in Beirut, in Baghdad, in Jerusalem, in Cairo. In Jerusalem, in Cairo. And even if our efforts of resistance fail, we should at least muster enough integrity and courage so that when the slaughter is over, we will have earned the right to ask for their forgiveness. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. I want to introduce the second part of our discussion here by just asking people to think. We're going to have a short period for some responses from the leaders that are here, and then we're going to talk amongst ourselves with some questions that you have. I would like people to think in a very focused way. I know we're all activists and we all have our concerns and many issues that are important to us. Tonight we are here to talk in a very particular way on the danger of a U.S. attack on Iran and what we can do as people living in this country to prevent it. And that is what we are asking our responders to speak to and what we will be having discussion about.
The question is, how do we respond to journalists and the argument coming from the pages of the New Yorker, George Packer, who says, we can't live in Iraq, we cannot genocide. Historically, we've heard arguments such as this before, which was, they'll be able to let go. If we leave, they'll kill themselves.
Well, the presupposition.
Why don't you just come up
All right.
here, Chris? We know this is mic'd.
The presupposition of that question is that American occupation forces are a force for stability in Iraq, and they're not. Is Ruth here? There should be some copies of the Nation story we did this July, where we spent 7 months, Layla El-Aring and I, interviewing 50 combat veterans from Iraq. Here, let me show it so people know what it looks like. Hopefully, there are some copies back there. It's 15,000 words. It's 7 months of work. We interviewed 50 combat veterans, all on the record. We taped every single interview, and then we typed the transcripts out because we wanted this to be bulletproof. And these veterans had the courage, the moral courage, to talk about the atrocities that they had witnessed and in some cases participated in, and how these atrocities were a daily occurrence in Iraq. So when people like Packard or others talk about how there will be civil war if we withdraw or a genocide, and I don't want to pretend that kind of competition between competing ethnic groups in Iraq will not take place. It will. I think it mischaracterizes our own role. Iraq is a country beset by violence and terror from militias, ethnic groups, warlords, kidnappers, criminals, a few foreign fighters, and the occupation forces. And the occupation forces are a major source of terror for the average Iraqi. And that was certainly what these veterans laid out in very graphic and disturbing detail. So the notion that we are a force of stability or calm or good, it just doesn't play out in the reality of Iraq. Unfortunately, that's not presented in this sort of mythic narrative of us as saviors that is adopted by most of the media when they cover the war. I mean, the very people, of course, who sold us the war no longer cover the war. They're busy with O.J. Simpson or Paris Hilton or Anna Nicole Smith. We know in terms of times, in terms of minutes of coverage devoted to the war, there's been a precipitous decline year by year by year, because as the war has just gone sour, their response is to pretend the war doesn't exist. This is, you can get it online, it's July 30th, August 6th issue.
There are free copies provided by the Nation at the back of the room, and I hope there's enough for everyone. It's really worth holding on to. I'm going to call on the young woman in the black shirt on this side. You, blonde, yes, you.
Because America is in Iraq. So what is your thought on, that's the situation. What is your thought on what should happen next? Should they leave as soon as possible? Should they, if not, stay? And if not leave? What then? Basically, I don't know anything about immediate action.
The question is, what should the U.S. do now that it's in